Hello, welcome to Strange Flows. I'm Evan. Today, I'm interviewing the founder of Strange Flows, the New Right podcast, and who has a new book out, The Black Album, Dark Lord Matt Pegas. It's on Amazon for, I think, $15.
Something like that. I think that the soft cover is purposely priced at $9.69, whereas the hardcover has now gone up to $19.69. So $15 is about the average price you're going to be paying.
Yes, buy the book, please. It's got lots of great content in there. Not content, art. Great words, great information. Thanks for allowing me to interview you today, Matt.
Absolutely. No, it is great to be on the other end of the interview for a change.
For those who don't know, the cover of the book, black, we have a Star of David, and we have a symbol of chaos with a 969, hence why Matt may have priced the book $9.69. I want to go through this book kind of in order with, what's in it. It has some elements of fiction, or there's a fiction story in the beginning, and then we have a few essays by Matt just about occultism in general and theory about what occultism is and how it plays into our lives, as well as some kind of references to other people within this kind of dissident sphere like Mike Ma and Bap. So let's start out with the fiction part of this book. It is called what's called, Matt? I'm turning to the page right now.
Well,
looks like it's called Possession. Or
the first story. Okay, so the first story is called Possession. The book is laid out a little bit like an album, an LP. So there's a side A and a side B. The side B, as well as an interlude, but the side B is the essays, and side A I call in a turn of phrase which now I can chuckle at a little bit, but at the time I was very much trying to channel H.P. Lovecraft and Thomas Ligotti. So side A is called Sketches of a Future Horror, and I called it that both because some of the horrors, it's not science fiction, but it's of a very contemporary, it's sort of these Lovecraftian kind of dark realms entering, and Ligottian, dark realms entering into our day-to-day lives type of horror, but it's done in a way that is kind of set in a near future or set in contemporary times. The first story, Possession, is about someone getting possessed sort of through email. So that's kind of where the Sketches of a Future Horror came from. It's also, and I really won't affirm or deny this at this point, future horror, the idea was that some of these things, and many of the stories end with it to be continued. I kind of wanted to leave the door open that I'll be honest that it's not something I'm currently working on, but the idea was that all of these may be works I expand into something longer at a later point, which sounds a little non-committal, but we're all of us who are publishing books online and tweeting, we're torn between different projects and things like this. I don't know when the time will come to bring some of these things to their completion, but the sketches aspect of Sketches of a Future Horror, they're meant to be sort of the seeds for what could grow. And I'm not 100% sure when some of these stories will be lengthened, but they've been started here.
Interesting, Matt. I too have experienced the cosmic horror of the internet, and as it appears here in this first story, Possession, as you mentioned, it's a email chain written in the form of an email chain. Have you had experiences with people on the internet who may have treated you this way, considering what you study, or any chat rooms that you've been involved in that kind of come to mind, at least the vibes that you may feel when you've been on the internet?
I certainly have, and really the exchange that's laid out in the Possession story is based on a real one. I'm not nearly important enough at this point. I don't have a big enough following to have really engendered this kind of discourse, but nevertheless, it did happen to me some time ago. Basically, when the story was set in 2020, I had someone who was very interested in what I was doing, and the email chain is kind of loosely based off of that. I talked to our mutual friend, Chris Gabriel, Meme Analysis. He basically told me, kind of got to get used to it. Like, you're going to attract this kind of attention if you're going to be dealing with these topics. But I can only imagine people with much bigger followings have much more of this kind of experience, or not. I don't know. But long story short, when you're dealing with occultism, certainly as a topic, but honestly, even with this exchange, it was even just politics of a certain kind. Any kind of fringe idea that's outside the mainstream is going to attract a certain element, and there's that, I guess, darkness or low-lying schizophrenia, I think, sort of exists anytime you're dealing with fringe spirituality or politics. It's there. Anyone who's spent any significant time in anarchist or alt-right or even probably Antifa, I certainly don't speak from experience there. In these circles, there is an element of crazy at the fringe, and it's unavoidable.
Yeah, certainly. Even, not just political spheres, but stuff like NoFap or fandoms in general, like
right,
the bronies. Yeah, they talk about weird stuff. They got some weirdos, and if you write interesting fan fiction, you'll get some weirdos coming at you, trying to ask you about
from
that.
Experience?
Oh yeah, for sure. I remember my days in the NoFap IRC.
Yeah.
As well as, just reading the brony Reddit.
Yeah.
And then that was a long time ago already, so we have evolved since then. And who are those kinds of people now, And that's when the stuff was fresh.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever engage with someone in the way that's kind of laid out in the story Possession in the Black Album? Did you ever sort of, because I felt when I started having people interact with me this way, and still largely to this day, if you send me some crazy stuff, chances are I might reply. So go ahead. But I felt this, what's the word? I felt sort of like I owed it to people, and maybe this is a mistake, and I would really advise anyone who's doing stuff online that this is a mistaken way of thinking about it, but it's one that I find myself going back to. I feel like if I've put something out there and someone's responded to it, I sort of owe it to them to sort of respond in turn, even if their interpretation is crazy or off base. I feel like there's a sort of with the story Possession itself. There's a sort of what's Fantasia? What's the story based off of where the drawing takes over its master? Is it just Fantasia? Is that the story? The Disney?
You mean the broom?
Yeah, or Frankendoodle. SpongeBob.
Oh no,
I think it's a more general. It's a Frankenstein narrative. It's like you created something, you put the seeds out there, you manifested it, and therefore I sort of felt beholden to deal with it because really that's a silly way of thinking about it. Just because you've written something and put it online doesn't mean you have to engage with everyone who engages with it. Just because someone has a crazy interpretation of it doesn't mean it's your fault. And yet I still felt quite beholden to it. I think that kind of comes through in the story Possession, of that sense of responsibility that during the real life event that it's based off of, I felt very freaked out because I felt like everything that was happening was something that I specifically had manifested, which, even though I dabble with occult stuff, that's really the only time I've ever had a truly scary experience, feeling like I'd manifested something dark that was going to destroy me and potentially others.
Yeah, and that was in reference to Doodle Bob. That's who you're
right.
Doodle Bob
Yes,
for SpongeBob.
That's the SpongeBob.
But
version.
secondly, the reason why we can say that happens is because you're really only putting a fraction of yourself out on the internet, and people don't really, working in the film industry myself, seeing famous people, you really see their mortality. And the internet does not obviously lend itself to being able to see people as mortals.
You become this archetype, and people can variously despise you for that and reduce you, but they can also, as was the case with this Possession story, they can valorize you. They can think, oh, this person is on the cusp of brilliance, and it can be very flattering to have someone think that about you, but it's quite dangerous. A friend of mine, Brandon Adamson, who's been on kind of fringe political spaces for a while. I was sort of in touch with him when this incident happened. He knew the same person. And what he said, so it's always stuck with me, and it continues to be true. It's a lot of hand-wringing, like on the right, like, oh, I'm going to be doxxed by Antifa and this kind of thing. Your fans, your quote-unquote fans, are probably going to be more dangerous to you than the people you think your enemies ever will, because your fans are the ones who actually care about you and your life, and therefore they can sort of mess with it and get inside your head in the way that people you're simply beefing with online. I mean, that's going to blow over in 10 minutes. But if you have someone who is actually invested in what you're saying, they're the ones who might turn around and become a more serious problem.
Yeah, it kind of harkens back to, we both saw lately the Dune film, and how, for example, Javier Bardem's character really takes to Timothy more so than he maybe anticipated in the first place. You essentially are creating, what's a good word? Zealots.
Yeah.
But I mean that also comes to the fact. Let's take Mr. Beast for example. He requires zealots. People on the internet require zealots to exist, to get money, to in regards to buying your merch and stuff, and that requires a level of zealotry that maybe something internet people just need to accept in regards to trying to, in an aeonic way, having to be, your own new god on the internet, so to speak. Do you think I know that's a pretty serious thing to say, but do you think that's kind of true?
Oh, I think it is true, and I've kind of chilled out about this myself. I mean, I think if the same thing that happened surrounding the possession story happened to me now, I think I'd handle it a lot better. I think I'd know how sort of non-serious it was. And I think, it's inevitable that if you're going to be putting stuff out there, you're going to attract a following, and there's going to be a weird element to that. I remember Chris Gabriel, Meme Analysis again, on this very podcast when I interviewed him, talked about how, his first year or two of making meme analysis videos, he was just talking about the memes. He kept it pretty analytical, intellectual. And then when he started adding what he called master discourse, which he does still to this day to an extent, but he added what he called master discourse to his videos, his popularity skyrocketed. And what he means by master discourse is basically, in his case and many others, saying very simply, don't smoke weed, don't look at pornography, do this, do that, do the other thing, be a better man this way. He added a little bit of that, and his popularity skyrocketed. Basically, people are absolutely thirsting to follow people, to be told what to do, to be told what to think. And that is a disease. And I'm not just saying that from some position of power, saying, look at all these people who would maybe care about what I have to say. No, I have been very guilty, of following people. Maybe even embarrassingly, maybe even Chris himself, who's younger than me, but I definitely have sort of latched onto some of that element in his videos before. Evan, maybe you can say the same thing. That he has this good advice in his case on how to be a better wizard. Perhaps it's this power game we're sort of all playing, and I'm just I'm implicated in this as well. I'm Lord knows, and highlighted in the book, I've been a big fan of Mike Ma, of Bronze Age Pervert, of all these figures who do a lot of this. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that these people have followings. It's just something that I think the consumer, the user, the internet user should be aware of, when they are becoming a follower, when they are requiring someone else to tell them what to do. These are all, maybe they're fine for a while, and maybe it's not bad to accept, a sort of student-teacher relationship sometimes, but it can be overdone on a personal level. And then in terms of people who are putting out the master discourse, you can also attract a slightly crazier element as well. What is the conclusion of what I'm saying? I'm not sure, but ultimately I think that we would do well to kind of liberate ourselves from this pattern of hero worship and student-teacher relationship, and we'd all be healthier if we simply took what we could from people and found the power within ourselves.
Yeah, and some creators, perhaps like Andrew Tate, who I'm sure would
there's worse examples than BAP and meme analysis. I mean, there's people who it's a real problem, like with Tate, and not to wax CNN moralistic about Tate, but I am no fan, and absolutely, I think we're seeing an even cruder. Peterson, I like Jordan Peterson as well. All of that stuff. I think young men have gleaned good lessons, but we're seeing like this cartoon version with people like Tate, where you actually do have people following very questionable advice from a lower quality of teacher. So it's a real issue. One of many issues on the internet that we have to grapple with is these Pied Pipers. And they're not. I'm not being a mainstream lib about it. They're not all Pied Pipers. There's a lot of good stuff to be gleaned from some of these fringe voices on YouTube, etc. But we can't be uncritical, or we're going to end up dumb.
Suppose we could say that the healthiest, the nicest of these creators are the ones that want you to get out there and truly flourish.
I think so.
And we can measure their goodness by how many souls they think they need to retain closely within their weird pod of like a cult, where they essentially take their soul and use them to their means, like chess. But does that make sense? Like, because you want people to live their life.
Yes.
Just take things, as you said. So maybe we could look at the internet like that.
I think so. I think that I don't even want to hammer on Tate too hard. I'm not the most well read on him. I just I don't like him. Let's suffice it to say that. So without denigrating him too much, I think that the reason I still to this day love BAP, like meme analysis a great deal. Chris always said, he said at the event that we met at, the meme analysis event in LA, which I guess I bring up on every podcast. I should probably stop. I'm doing my own hero worship here.
Well, this pod is called Strange Flows,
which is from his deck. Yeah, I mean, it's a debt, right? It's an inevitable debt, and there's great wisdom. But anyway, what Chris said, I think, at that event was, when someone sort of brought up, like, oh, are you trying to start a cult, half joking? It was like, he never would tell people to follow anything but their own true will. That's his way of putting it. With BAP, I mean, he's often sort of downplayed his own importance, and what I always used to say about BAP, contra, and this was during my more squarely dissident right days, contra to Richard Spencer, God forbid, or even Fuentes, like BAP gives advice, talks about ways of living and ways of doing things that actually make his followers, I think, happier and healthier. Can't really say that for Fuentes with his JQ obsession or anything like that. Regardless of what you think about that, it's not really doing anyone any favors to get lost in these stupid political rabbit holes. Whereas BAP, has many alternative and fringe political viewpoints that you probably shouldn't bring up in public. But, I really advocate the more general, holistic health of the soul. So you have to, by all means, find teachers and find people to glean things from, but be hyper critical, because there's a lot of traps.
Yes, you must develop a meta community, or if you are to survive the new Aeon, you must be able to discern and be healthy. Eat good food.
Yeah.
But we've talked about that for a moment, so I think we should move on to your next fiction story, My Saturn Return.
Right.
On the first page of My Saturn Return, it starts with a quote by Fred Durst.
Correct, yeah. It's a little bit of an irony, perhaps, because I don't think he's really one of the great sages of our time.
Reach deep down inside.
99.
Yes, from Woodstock 99. Reach deep down inside and take all that negative energy and let that shit out of your fucking system. Do you want to just tell me about this story, Matt? And just kind of like, it's not too long. It's
probably one of the longest stories within the fiction section, which isn't very long, as you said. I think it's 15, 20 pages.
Yeah.
25 pages, perhaps. So My Saturn Return. Well, I'll take the mic for a second, just ruminate on this one. I did not know what a Saturn Return was until I did a podcast with Alex Kazemi in October of 2022. And he sort of explained it to me, because we share a Saturn return. Saturn, which is now in Pisces, that's our Saturn return. I hadn't known about it, but him sort of explaining this to me, and doing that first podcast I did with him in general, set off a number of associations in my head, and sort of that. Like the week after I did that, and the week after I started thinking of the Saturn Return, I had known I wanted to write a book called The Black Album for a long time, and I knew what the cover would look like. for whatever reason, I knew after publishing my first novel, Dragon Day, in 2021, that I would publish some kind of collection of essays and short stories, and that it would be called The Black Album, and that it would look like Death in June's album, The World That Summer, which is what the cover's based off of. But in summer of 2022, I was had just started a new job. I was kind of struggling to find or like refine my voice, as it were, and something about doing that podcast with Alex and learning about the stage of life known as the Saturn return, which is from, for most people it hits but somewhere between 28 and 30, which is very simply for astrology noobs, when Saturn has about a 27 to 30 year time span of when it goes in and out of one of the 12 signs of the zodiac. When I was born, it was in Pisces, and it returned to Pisces in May I think it was March actually of last year, 2023. So all of this was going on before my Saturn return was starting properly, but I was starting to have this sense of getting older, sort of reaching my 30s and coming to terms with who I really was and who I wasn't, all the missed opportunities, all of the turns I could have taken that I did not. The beginnings of a certain melancholy and depression, which is often associated with the Saturn return, I think were there. And I knew that I wanted my Saturn return is sort of the core of the book in a way, because the whole thing, both the essays and fiction, is supposed to capture, I guess, a little bit of that feeling of stretching towards the age of 30, and ultimately the Saturn return. It's roughly synonymous with Jungian individuation. These things happen at the same time, and they can be described alchemically as well. I won't go too far into this because even though I've written this book, I'm far from the expert. But basically, within alchemy and within Jungian individuation, which maps onto alchemy and the creation of the Sorcerer's Stone, you start with the dark. You start with something called Negrito, which is where all the ingredients of the Philosopher's Stone are sort of reduced to a black uniformity. So you start with darkness. That's what the Saturn return story is supposed to capture. It's very close to my life, first person narration, with to be clear, significant differences from my life as well. And just kind of capturing a mood of getting older and the old things that used to work and bring me joy no longer working. The Fred Durst quote, around the same time, this is just one of these, I'm not going to try and make something more out of it than what it is. But around the same time, I watched the Woodstock 99 documentary on HBO. I was kind of going through a little bit of a new metal, that's NU, metal kick. And a lot of that music is kind of silly. I was listening to a lot of Korn. There's a reference to Korn within the story. There's a reference to, obviously, Limp Bizkit. There's a reference to metalcore as well, which is a different genre, but kind of similar aesthetics. And I was listening to a lot of that kind of music from Columbine era. And again, it's not the most critically acclaimed stuff, but I was kind of thinking about how that music channeled a certain anger and aggression in a really effective way, which I do think is true, and I'll stand by that. And how, as silly as it might sound, like I wanted to put that in a book. Black Album is Negrito. It's the first stage in an alchemical process. Will there be a gray album? Will there be a white album later on? Maybe. And these are supposed to chart an evolution on my own part, and that kind of music, Limp Bizkit, as silly as it might seem, and even just that era that, again, to reference Kazemi, in his book New Millennium Boys, kind of captured it well. A certain very male, very adolescent feeling of restless anger that I relate to very much, and that I wanted to channel it. Just to give a final thought, I see you're going to ask another question. I had some writer's block before writing the Black Album, and a little bit of it was like, I think a lot of writers get in their own head, like, what do I write next? It's got to be even better. And for me, it's like, forget writing better. I'm not going to write a book like Radiohead. If I need to write a book like Korn, I'm going to write a book like Korn. And I don't know if the Black Album, hopefully, whatever, maybe seems more sophisticated than new metal, but that was very much the sentiment. It was like, screw it. If all I have is this kind of pent-up rage, then why does everything have to be so pretentious? I'm just going to put my darkness in a book.
That's beautiful. And, for those newbies out there, this shit, it's normal to do this. let's think of one of the most popular artists of our time, Tyler the Creator. If we look at his first works as compared to now, it's important just to embrace your shadow and really put that out there, because that's really who we are. That's a part of who you are, as well as what was I gonna say? God damn it! I've done it before too in regards to my photography art. Like I've made darker shit. Now I make happier stuff. It's totally normal. So if you haven't done that, do it. But don't go too crazy, because that would be really bad for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and that's the age-old debate. Did Marilyn Manson cause? It's related. It's related to that time period in my head of the Woodstock '99 thing, the 1999 in general. Again, because Emmy's New Millennium Boys captures it. That age-old question, like, does dark art, not like dark arts like magic, but like does dark music and dark media and dark art, does it inspire people to do bad things, or is it a salve? And I don't think there's an easy solution. I think that people can be negatively influenced by media. I'm not not just bandying the old line of like, free speech, blah, blah, blah. Like, I get it. There can be genuinely negative influences. I just talked to Jack Mason about Marilyn Manson, and he was more on the side of like, maybe Manson was bad, etc. So it's an open debate, but I ultimately lean on that art should be a channel for these dark things, that it's more helpful than it is negative. But that being said, I accept that there are absolutely pitfalls. To go back to the first story, just briefly, Possession, again, the fear was that I'd put something out there that would inspire a real world negative event. That was my fear. That can definitely happen. I don't think there's an easy instruction guide for what to do and what not to do. Other than that, I know it's necessary to embrace one's shadow and find an outlet for it, one way or the other. And in terms of the work you put out there, I think you just have to try and give it enough context, but also there is some truth to, once it's out of your hands, there's not a lot you can do with it. So I don't have any easy solutions to that, but it's a road we all walk, exercising demons versus giving them power. I don't know.
I see. Well, on the note of doing bad things, on to the next chapter, Funky Town. For those who have watched Gore, you may be familiar with Funky Town. This is a pretty short.
Have you seen it?
Shorter story. I have. I'm not really afraid to look at Gore, perhaps to my detriment. But,
no, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one in particular is just about. Why don't you want to expound briefly on this one, because I feel like we don't need to go over this one too long.
No,
I feel like it's best for the reader to really read it.
Yeah. It's best for the reader to read it. Basically, it is a story. This one is, pretty. It's weird because it's fiction, but it's about a real video. I say it's fiction because it's the narrator, who I never really gave much thought to who this narrator is, other than I just wanted to write from a slightly younger perspective, is younger than me, kind of referring to like a middle school sleepover in 2015. I mean, I'm older than that, but let's not expound on it too much. But this is sort of funny, so I'll say it. I hadn't thought about Funky Town in years and years and years. And I guess I'll just be honest about this too. I have not seen it.
Wow.
So that for the first time here. I have no interest in seeing it. I despise this kind of stuff. The only thing I thought about watching it, because I could not bring myself to do it. And I think that's the right choice. What did disturb me, so you said let's not expound upon it, and here I am giving an anecdote, but whatever. One of the first times I moved to LA, I was at a party and someone described it to me. The mere description, I guess I'm a pussy, I don't know. The mere description of it put me in a funk, no pun intended, for a few days. It was just so disturbing. He gave a detailed description. And when I was writing this, I couldn't bring myself to watch it, but I did try to read like as close of a description as I could. I wanted to know what was in it without seeing it. Anyhow, it really disturbed me because I was, I don't know, I guess a little bit sheltered, a little bit not. I was not very online like in college and stuff. I wasn't thinking about this shit. And someone described it to me and it fucked me up. I hadn't thought about it in years. I was in Mexico because we don't really know where the video was shot, but we know it's in Mexico. I was in Mexico and Funky Town came on the radio. And the moment of I'm in Mexico and I'm hearing Funky Town on the radio just brought the memory of this horrible video that had been described to me flooding back, and it re-fucked me up to even think about it. And again, I know this is some weak sauce stuff compared to people who actually see gore, but that's where I'm at. And this was like late 2022. It inspired me to again think about it, and sort of again, as expounded upon in the story, it's sort of for me the mere existence of that video and things like it, and the fact that there are people who do that level of horrendous thing that's depicted in the video to other people, really puts some stuff into context for me. It sort of rewires, even just knowing about it for me sort of rewires my brain about like what is possible here under the sun, you know, in terms of the level of cruelty, in terms of what can happen if you cross the wrong people. It's not something I go about thinking about in my day-to-day life because it's so disturbing, but like shit can get pretty bad, as anyone who's seen any gore knows. I guess this Funky Town... Do you think it's the worst video you've ever seen? I think by popular consensus, it's one of the worst, but do you have thoughts on that?
Regarding worse stuff on the internet, it gets a lot worse, okay. I'll have to say. I think that the motivations for seeing this stuff kind of come from childhood trauma that you incur by... viewing this stuff just like in the story, by friends or whatever, and then you, from there on, have a acquired taste for it. Not taste, like you like it, but just more so...
You're desensitized.
You're
desensitized. Like drugs or sex. Like, you can... Like, I'm kind of a noob with drugs, too, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like, for me, like, the weed's a little heavy. But for other people who've been smoking weed since they were 12, like, they, you gotta do more. And with sex, too, like, some people fuck the whole world. Some people have sex, like, twice in their life. You know what I mean? Like, these things get in your brain. That's kind of a different topic, but I was just curious kind of what your general sense on it was.
I'll quickly just continue on that. Yes, it's very violent, and yes, it's, more violent than normal things, but... There's plot points in certain videos of violence that are more horrific than just like the actual violence itself.
Since we're on this topic, do you want to any that come to mind in particular? What's the worst thing you've ever seen?
Probably a woman having her eyes stabbed. The guy's just like on top of her, and she just gets stabbed over and over again and is like alive. But
why do you think he did it? That's what gets me. That's what gets me about Funky Town. It's like, why?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably some horrible cartel double-crossing thing that's... But one thing that's unique about Funky Town is that it's a little bit unknown. Like a lot of other terrible cartel videos, it's like, okay, this person was the bounty hunter for this cartel. The other cartel got him, and, he probably did this to other people, and now they're doing it to him. With Funky Town, I think it's still completely unknown. So that's the other mysterious thing about it.
We don't know, but... In the way I see it, it's really difficult for me to... I feel bad expounding upon things like this, but at the same time, it's the reality of our world. And
these are things that can happen under the sun, these which no one thinks about, no one likes to think about. But now with the internet, we know about them. We have access. Random kids growing up in Austin, Texas, are exposed to them. All of this, to me in my head, and this is what I think Chris liked about this piece and had me read it at that aforementioned meme analysis. But it's like tarot. This is the connection I made in my mind. This is the connection that's made in the piece. I was really my first flush of really getting into tarot at the time is all of these cards represent different elements of reality. Now, in the age of the internet, our sense, the things that we can know about of aspects of reality is greatly expanded. One of the points made in the Funky Town piece that I wrote is like, just a few decades ago, like most people, like, they knew torture could happen, they knew bad shit could happen, but like there are levels, demonic vistas of human suffering, not to mention all the weird porn stuff too, like that we just didn't really, your average person, or even your less than average person, like just didn't really think about. But now we have access to it all, and in my head it was like, this is like a new tarot deck of the tarot deck of the future that highlight. It doesn't all have to be bad either, but just the internet, and now with AI adds another layer to it. All of this is like this portal to we can go any place we want, even the most beyond Marquis de Sade terrible things can now be imagined. So for me, it's like Funky Town is the new hanged man in a speculative deck made up of different things that a young person today might come across the internet. Hangman, which if we want to get into tarot theory, hangman isn't always bad. It can mean good things too. But if we think about the tarot, the Marseille deck, that's from the Middle Ages. Like, what's the worst thing you could imagine seeing at that time? I guess a hanging dude, someone hung. Nowadays, we don't see hanged people in our day-to-day lives. Most of us have never even seen a dead body, but we can see things a lot worse than hanged people online, and that's kind of our access to that. Demonic, but I try to be neutral about it too. These are all things that can happen. Understand them. I don't encourage people to watch this. I haven't done it myself, but it's out there. It's 2 clicks away.
Very true. Curse Against the World.
Yeah, not much to say about this. There's kind of a character in the book, as sort of a lot of my fictional stories have often involved, again, to go back to that teacher-student thing, in my novel is this Professor Wallingford character. In this, there's a podcaster of sorts, kind of people who expound upon darker, more apocalyptic visions of the world that are not necessarily my own views, but that I guess are an aspect of my shadow side. And I think A Curse Against the World was just trying to, this little 2-page section of quotes from a podcast is what it's supposed to be. It's fiction. Was kind of similar to sections of Dragon Day. Supposed to be sort of a place for some of these more dark thoughts to put them in the voice of someone else.
Let's move on to Renaissance of the Ritual. We start with a quote from Mike Ma of Gothic Violence. This is the inevitable path of certain men, not occultism, but the rituals of it, not darkness, but a closeness to it. So
it's a great quote.
That is a great quote.
Still mysterious too. Like, what did he mean by that? Like, what does Mike believe? I don't know.
Yeah, what does Mike believe? Because
I don't think it's the same as what I believe. He says, to be clear, but I've appropriated it for this.
He says that, but he loves Julian Casablancas, and that guy is a skinny guy.
He is a skinny guy. He writes about Julian Casablancas and Gothic Violence too. To leave aside the question of what Mike Ma does or doesn't believe, that quote really stuck with me. Renaissance of the Ritual, I mean, to me, not that it's exceptionally well written or anything, but to me it's still one of the most important, I guess, nonfiction things I've written, and I want to expand upon it. I intend to, and have to an extent. The gist of it is what? I mean, you read it. It was probably the first thing you ever read of mine back when it was just online. The basic gist of it was a way of approaching occultism and esotericism that sort of I came into around end of 2021, beginning of 2022, where it's not just like teenage Wiccan stuff, but rather exploring, and it's not like LARPy paganism either, but rather considering the elements. I mean, the argument in the piece is rather long. I don't want to rehash it all. People should read it, but basically, thinking about writers like Mike Ma and BAP, are the very online writers in this, but I also talk about Thomas Ligotti and others, sort of trying to figure out what a new spirituality would look like, a sort of refreshed spirituality, because it seems to me a lot of mainstream religion has sort of lost the script a little bit in terms of the original spiritual impetus behind it. So, Renaissance of the Ritual is me. I mean, in some ways, it's me trying to justify my own sin or whatever. It's me trying to justify my own interest in occult topics, but through the lens of not necessarily being opposed to religious orthodoxy, but rather seeking a way that some of these things could be renewed. Kind of we were talking about with Rudy the other week, the previous episode of this podcast. About how there is this new potential for a newly sort of spiritual way of looking at the world, that post being sort of dried up by the overreach of science. And I'm a believer in both both occult schools, both sort of taking spirituality into your own hands, lighting your own candle, setting your own intentions. That element of occultism, I think, is good. I think there's a spark there, but ultimately it has to be channeled into something higher. I am not the person to ask, which of the world's great religions should that be channeled through. We just went to mass this morning. I'm not anti-Catholic, not anti any of these mainstream religions. I don't have the answer yet, but I do think there's something to not simply relying on the wisdom of the past, but rather refinding the spark of spirituality within our own lives that I do think I found in occultism. Sorry to those for whom that sounds like pure degeneracy, but it's the path I'm still walking on. And if you disagree with me from the get-go, I'd encourage you to read the essay, and we can debate. But yeah,
a lot of what you're saying, Matt, has to do with, in a sort of Nietzschean way as well, thinking of him and the idealisms of Christianity and stuff. It sounds like you're referring to attempting to reconcile who man really is and who it ought to be and what it believes, instead of shunning yourself, like shunning what you really feel and think, but trying to channel the darkness of oneself and the positive parts of the self, melding that into one. Because I think that might be some of the reasons why you may have just turned away, in a sense, from Catholicism and into more stuff like this.
I think that's right. I wish I had some good master discourse on this, and I could tell you exactly what I think and why you should think the same thing. I don't. I'm a lost soul like anyone else. I'm still figuring this out. But I think there's something to what you're saying that's very true. I mean, I remember one of the first things that sort of led me toward occultism, as like a 25, 26-year-old man, which is, most people kind of go through an occult phase as a teenager and then get out of it. For me, I guess I had a version of that, but mostly I was pretty orthodox. I was an atheist in high school, and then I was pretty just normal Catholic in college. But I remember one of the things there's a few moments I could point to that led me to think, there's got to be something sort of beyond this, or I have to look elsewhere for wisdom again. And I wring my hands and clarify. I'm not saying that there's not wisdom by the book and within Catholicism. I'm just saying it seemed to me at a certain point that there was something elsewhere that I needed to turn my attention to. One of the first moments, and maybe this is extremely inauspicious, but it was in DVD commentary on a Kenneth Anger movie. I think it was Lucifer Rising. So I guess this doesn't really. This is if I'm trying to make an argument to someone that that people who are traditionally religious should take this seriously, maybe not talking about a Satanist's film, but nevertheless, I'm just being honest with where this came from. Talking about the Egyptian iconography in Lucifer Rising. I think it was maybe Isis and Osiris or something, and talking about how Christianity so often sort of glosses over the wholeness of, and this is very Gnostic too, the wholeness within the dark and light opposition. Like within Christianity, it's the light banishes the dark. I want to be fair. Like there is a space. The darkness does serve a role in Christianity too. It's not a completely infantile religion by a long shot, contrary to what some would say. There is this understanding that that Adam's sin is somehow good ultimately because it helps God redeem the world with Jesus. I'm not saying that this kind of thinking is completely alien to mainstream Christianity, although on a day-to-day level, I mean, you certainly meet a lot of silly Christians, if we're being honest. But Anger's point was that Christianity sort of glosses over the intricate need for light, light needing darkness, darkness and light ultimately being one whole thing that complement each other and that require each other. That to me, I think, is kind of something you get more within Gnosticism and more within occultism is this understanding that, death and life, good and evil, in the Jungian sense, shadow work with whatever the opposite of shadow work is, that all of these things sort of nourish each other. It's a more sort of quasi, not even necessarily polytheist, but a more holistic, there's multiple sides to things type of view that struck me as more true to my experience of reality. And my experience of reality as an artist too. I think there is a limit on how inspirational sort of above board Christianity and other religions can be to the artist, because art is always such an alchemical process. Again, I don't think any of this requires one to denounce Christ or the church, but I do think in an alchemical way there's more to the dark side of things than simply something that's regrettable. I think in the grand scheme of things, understanding an undivided wholeness was something that my attention was turned towards. I hope I'm not being too vague here. I just think that extent, that is what religion often occludes, is the real functionings of dark and light and the elements, and that is what has been relegated to occultism. Renaissance of the ritual is my attempt to say, well, we can lean back into esotericism, because far from being the enemy of religion, a lot of religion is founded in that original mysticism as well. Again, I don't have the master discourse on this. I'm a lost soul, but part of my journey has been stepping toward that, rather than the easy answers that a lot of mainstream religion, I think, has been deduced to.
The Black Album is a push when we were being pulled, by Christianity, by atheism. It's kind of pushing back just a little bit, make things more centered, I'd say. It's because what this sounds like is a quest for a greater balance. Yeah. Instead of, from Christianity, because it's only reasonable to consider other options when being told the other option is, there's only one way. Of course, that's not true, especially within the complexities of our world.
Yeah.
So, in regards to all this, a lot of the inspiration, as we're talking about, the title of the essay, Renaissance of the Ritual, when you were reading that book, and it's when you're first reading that book, were you amazed by the violence or the
Gothic violence?
Yeah. Of Gothic violence. Were you amazed by the imagery, or because it's really synonymous with essentially Fight Club, like Chuck Palahniuk. Right. This isn't new.
No,
but it's differently presented, and it feels like just a stepping stone away from Chuck into something that's more real. Because with Fight Club, what is there to really hold on to besides masculinity itself?
Oh, yeah.
So would you like to expound upon what really struck you with the rituals involved and why it may not have been? Because you're Catholic, and it is pretty, or you were Catholic, and it's not really, it is kind of close in imagery-wise.
Do you mean Gothic violence?
Gothic violence is, sorry, I wasn't being clear. I'm talking about Gothic violence.
Cool.
The book, yeah.
Okay, Mike Ma, to me, first and foremost, is a vibe. He is a hell of a graphic designer. He does the graphic design of his own books. He has the best playlist on Spotify, the Mike Ma Mega playlist. And yeah, he's a vibe. So I don't deign to know exactly where he stands on all things. I believe he's a kind of weird, not weird in a bad way, but he kind of his very much has his own take on Christianity, is my understanding. He's not a Catholic, Mike Ma, at all. I don't know if he goes to any church. He calls himself an instinctual Christian. I don't want to pretend that I know exactly where he stands on all things, but what I do like, again, is his vibe, and there are flashes within his oeuvre of something very brilliant, in my opinion. The Renaissance, the ritual chapter of Gothic violence maybe being the best example. He says later, I think you didn't quote this part exactly, but that he expects we'll see a rebirth of white magic within our lifetime. And find to keep not I don't mean to be name dropping. These aren't like big celebrities, but these are friends, and these are people who have influenced me, and these are people who've influenced the book. Alex Kazemi has even given me a nice blurb in this book. I found out about Alex through Mike Ma, which is the craziest thing. Mike dedicated his first book, Harassment Architecture, to Alex. I guess let's let this plane go by. Yeah, Harassment Architecture is dedicated to a bunch of people only identified by initials, and then Alex Kazemi. They were friends. They met through Milo Yiannopoulos, of all people. None of this history really matters. I don't know what my conclusion on it all is, other than that there's these, and I hate to be so vague, and I hope the book delivers a better punch than in my meandering thoughts here, but there's all these webs of connectivity between some version of Christianity, between occultism, because Kazemi's pure occultism, he's into Kabbalah, he's not right-wing or tradcath at all. There's some web, and I think I even put it this way in Renaissance of the Ritual. I'm just trying to sketch some connections between some threads of thought between very different thinkers, trying to lay the groundwork for what a spirituality of the future could be. And I've completely lost track of the question you asked, and I'm sorry, but I just think it has to do with...
What did you like about the book, about Gothic violence?
Oh, yes.
You were like, did you like the violence, or did you like...
I liked the vibe. I liked the air of mystery. And this ties into what I was going to say. I like the air of mystery surrounding it. I like that it seems... I'm not sure what precisely it was doing, but you're right. It's more than just Fight Club. It's more than just right-wing politics. It's that... It's a little bit of a Fight Club mentality. It's a little bit of a Bronze Age pervert mentality. It's a little bit of a we should take back our government, Unabomber. That's not exactly, it's a little bit of Ted Kaczynski. It's a little bit of a lot of things, kind of like my essay, but all of it seems to be woven together by this, the vibe, for lack of a better word, and this profound... It seems to me some profound sense of God and spirituality that underlies Mike's work, that I can only describe as a vibe, and it's a vibe that's totally unique to him. That's something I'm trying to cultivate for myself, and I'm not sure if I've gotten there yet, but I like the vibe.
I see in the book and in Renaissance of the Ritual, I think what we see is a very, being close to the divine, the importance of that. Because as we look to the current political spectrum right now, progressives, so to speak, not to label all progressive as such, there's an embracement of Satanism and Luciferianism.
I think a really lame version. I don't think it's real, but go on.
No, I agree. And when you look at LaVey, the Satanic Bible, what he actually espoused, and then contemporary Satanism today, it looks so lame and fake. The aesthetics of the Satanist Instagram page are gross and nasty, and that's in a way what it's that's what it's supposed to be, right? You can be close to the divine, but it can still be ugly. But point is that what we're seeing in Matt's book and Gothic violence as well, it's heavily inspired from, is the mixing of the beauty of divinity and the ugliness too. And we got a duck at our pool right now. We're actually doing this interview
poolside.
Yeah, poolside right now, getting some vitamin D.
Little video of this guy, or a picture at least.
Matt was actually really looking forward to seeing this duck on the pool.
So we're gonna take a little break. Well, we're not gonna stop recording. I'm just gonna. Wow, it's a little Sopranos moment of this duck swimming in the pool.
It's a very cute duck.
Get cut off, but
no, I mean I
maybe
like
we could just one out of total left field, and rather than using the cover of the book, I'll just make this picture of the duck. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the cover of the book. But
for
we're playing with contrast here. We got the Black Album, which is a dark book with a six-sided star and a chaos star in the front, but we're doing it poolside, and this duck just went underwater. Hold on, I got to get a video of this.
For the listeners, this is it's a classic duck. It's got the green head. It's got the yellow
classic
neck.
Duck.
Yeah, classic duck look.
If you ordered this duck on Amazon, you'd select the classic option. What a beauty.
It's gotten out of the pool. Ooh, it's stretching for us.
Lovely.
Damn, that's really cute.
It really is.
And there's 2 other ducks, another green-headed duck and a brown duck.
Yeah, they're mallard ducks. My sister's an ornithologist, so I know this kind of thing. They're mallard ducks. We got 2 males because male birds are prettier than females because they got to attract them. So we got two males and a female.
Nice.
I wonder what was going on there. But yeah, the female's just kind of in the shade under a chair, and the duck is swimming again. Hold on, I gotta get another picture. This is so stupid. I'm being autistic about this. I have thoughts. I'll say it in a second.
No, I think the 2 guys are the other duck's sister, and they're having a pool. One of them is married to the girl one, and then that's its brother, and they're going for a swim.
Yeah, something like that. This is just too cute. But I have thoughts that we can go back to.
Nice. Anyway, yeah, we were getting really into our shit. So
no, but I want to say well, if you have something to say, by all means, say it. But
no,
what I was going to say was this. Okay, so you talk about how Satanism is ugly today.
Oh yeah, Satanism ugly, Christianity pretty. So,
sort of, but not always.
We can't be weird and lean into one side, the ugliness too much. It's okay to do that, but as long as you know what the good looks like, you can make something even, kind of center that's not too lame or too good to where like it's unreal, is what I'm saying. Because the problem with the Satanists is that they don't accept beauty, like the objectivity of beauty, which I think we believe in, kind of. Like things can be objectively beautiful, but there's like an ideal, but you can't really say that certain things aren't beautiful even when they really are.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely something to that. A lot of these denominations have their issues, and with Satanism, you can certainly say it's a rejection of beauty. I don't think that's how LaVey meant to start it. I think there's other Satanists who maybe are more interesting than that. But I think in today's world, it is this, left-coded rejection of beauty and embracing of ugliness, which I don't think Satanism has to be. I mean, I don't think that's what Kenneth Anger was. I think there's people who have a much more, or from a more authentic line of Luciferian thought, but I think modern Satanism is not. What I wanted to say is this: how strange is it that both sort of, for lack of a better term, mainstream Satanism, and in a lot of ways mainstream Catholicism, mainstream Judaism, as people never shut up about online, but pretty much all mainstream Christianity too, they're kind of all united, not necessarily espousing it explicitly, depending on the denomination. In the case of Satanism, maybe some of them do. But it seems to me, and again, I'm not trying to make this into right-wing story hour here, but it seems to me that all of these religions are kind of slouching towards a kind of no borders, no genders, no difference sort of ideology. Does that resonate at all? It kind of seems to me like whether you call yourself a Satanist or a Catholic, like increasingly what you're talking about is a spiritual justification for the sort of political status quo of denying difference and promoting radical equality. Does that ring a bell? This duck is now taking a shit into the pool. Does that ring a bell at all, or am I being too ideologically right wing? Because to me it seems, to finish with that, to me it seems like we actually not just God, but also Satan is dead. All of these religions are just vaguely palliative for people, but ultimately spiritualizing, supporting of the status quo, which I mean in the most general sense of basically denying hierarchy, denying difference, denying, they're basically all just spiritual vectors for late stage democracy. I don't know. I'm not trying to wax monarchist, but does that resonate at all? Because that often seems to me to be an issue.
It does resonate because they are literally two sides of the same coin. Satanism and Christianity, or they directly oppose each other. So of course, I
guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think I'm being too flippant here. Like your average liberal Satanist is not nearly so far from your average liberal Catholic as they should be. Like they're going to probably have a different take on one or two things, maybe like abortion even. But like your basic liberal Catholic of today is gay marriage, all well and good. I'm not saying it's not either, by the way. I'm not really putting my own views as contrary to this. It seems to me we live in times when political reality has totally subjugated spiritual reality, and the spiritualism is often, on an organized religion basis, whether it's Satanism or Catholicism, is often simply employed as a kind of boon to this public morality.
I see what you're saying, and to an extent I agree with you. It's just that to embrace Satanism, I guess, is to like fully lean into the badness as a liberal. Because I see what you're saying, because when we were at Mass this morning, I was like, oh man, like, so the Pope has reign over all this? And then I was like, but the Pope also affirmed gay marriage, not too long ago.
Right.
And like that in and of itself is like a concession to the Satanists, I guess.
I wouldn't say the Satanists, but I mean, I get why you're saying that. I think it's just to the world, and it's just, I think a lot of these spiritual practices start as authentic orientations towards something higher and are quickly denigrated by the world. That being said, I won't really say much in lip service of Satanism here, but within Catholicism, there's so many redeemable threads. I'm not dismissing the whole thing. I just think, and this is part of the point that's made in Renaissance of the Ritual, it's part of the point that people like Bat make, there's issues. There's issues with that. I don't want to be I'm against anti-organized religion guy, because like I know that making one individual self measure of all things has plenty of problems too. But I do think that that organized religions of this world, I'm not even saying that they should be anything different. It's just that they're all subjugated by the material political reality of our time.
So is it actually the smartest to be essentially like a theosophist or like a Gnostic, I suppose? Is that what we're kind of concluding to right now, in the sense that what's interesting, right, is people within the sphere of whatever the hell we're talking about, they really like Warhammer 40k, they really like Helldivers 2, and those are like a future black space fascism that is born of a religion that doesn't exist yet. So in affirming theosophy or affirming Gnosticism, or essentially saying like, oh man, there's going to be something one day and it's not any of this shit yet. But then also, like, are those belief systems the healthiest and the most satisfying to raise someone as with a kid with? Maybe even we haven't even said the word Islam yet. During this podcast.
I know less about Islam. I feel less equipped to talk about it. Listen, I'm very.
So who are the good guys and kind of who are the bad guys? And
I'm
is what I'm getting at.
I'm just going to have to take a humble tract here, or perhaps a annoyingly self-effacing tract here, and say that I no longer know. I'm without conclusions. We went to Mass this morning. I pray to God. I try to keep my heart in the right place, in a place of openness to God and to divinity, and ask Him, to make virtue of my sins, and just try and take it one day at a time. Because any firm sense of, Catholicism good, occultism good, in my own praying and thinking, I've never really been satisfied with either of those lines of thinking, other than definitely acknowledging that both have a lot to offer, and maybe whatever the best thing is, it is a thing of the future, and maybe I'll listen back to this in 5 years and think, wow, I was really lost and confused then. But really, I don't have great conclusions or solutions to a lot of these problems. That's kind of what I've realized, and I'm just trying to orient my life towards God as I understand Him, and hope that will lead me into light.
We're recording this on April 7th, 2024, the day before the big eclipse. If that comes to mean anything extraordinary, probably not. Knock on wood. I'm going to walk over to this tree and just knock on the wood real quick. Just hopefully nothing bad happens. Because everyone seems to think that. Wouldn't you agree, Matt? That's what we're that's the temperature right now?
Yeah, I think, I'm more hopeful. I think 2024 is going to be a good year.
I think so too.
I guess to finish my thought, I don't want to sound like someone who has no idea what they're talking about. I also have to be honest that my own sort of spiritual and religious searching is far from over, and I don't know where all this is leading. What I can say, and we're going to talk about this on another episode of this podcast later with my friend Istvan Verde about the movie Excalibur. And this also ties a little bit into the Mike Ma sort of vibe, where he's Christian but also talking about white magic. I mean, in that movie Excalibur, you have people sort of, very Christian, very religious, and you worshiping the one God, but you also have Merlin, you also have the kind of the spirits of the brook and of the stream, and these things sort of coexist. I think maybe that's what we're heading back towards, that not a tension, but a coexistence between something sort of pagan, something sort of esoteric, but it doesn't mean we have to throw away the one God. Maybe these things come back together in a way that we can't at this time fully understand. By the way, I'm not even being a polytheist. I'm not saying there's literally a spirit of the brook and of the stream, but I do, another person that's referenced, even with the symbolism on the cover, is Alexander Dugin, who's also, he's an old believer, Russian Orthodox, but also somewhat of a Crowley appreciator. I think the ways of God are so beyond us, and I think that there is a sense in which Christianity as just logos, as just logic and rationality. I mean, that, maybe who's to say there weren't missteps? Who's to say there isn't some aspect of spiritual reality that has been omitted and that we must now come back into terms with? But I'm quite sincere when I say I do think it could all happen within a Christian context.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about going to Mass today, that it would be kind of weird to take your child to Gnostic Mass.
Oh, yeah, forget that. And Gnostic would be the best, there's a nice Gnostic church here in Los Angeles, the Besant Lodge, that would be the best possible version, but even that I would not do. Yeah. And forget taking them to, the OTO, I mean, oh my God. And forget raising them without religion. I think, I was raised Catholic. I think it's important to have some kind of religion, and don't even get me started on raising them Wiccan or some kind of LARPy neo-pagan. Like, forget all of that.
Yeah, it's funny how we're so oh yeah, do candle magic or whatever, but we're also those guys are weird too. Or not to hate on you, listener, if that's your vibe, because it's also our vibe too, but also not embracing it fully either as your identity. Because ultimately we want our children, speaking from this context, we want our children to be happy, right? And that's how we, coming from a American Protestant background, so to speak, see happiness as being identifying with beauty and a sense of, holding values, kind of a closest to the chest regarding sexuality as well, but also not making someone hate themselves for that, because that's kind of what leads you to overindulging in that later in your life as well. Wouldn't you say, Matt?
Yeah, overindulging in things like Wicca and what are you talking about overindulging?
Well, there's kind of this cultural context as of, for example, people are oh, Catholic girls are just total hoes because they just get told not to do sex, but then they're just going to do it anyway because they just get told all the time to not do that, so they're going to do it more than your average bear. Because that's where I kind of come at with looking at occultism and accepting it, just so I don't feel myself doing actually bad things that are. You're saying so it's
that. Shadow work. You're saying embracing the beast. Is that what you're saying? Correct me if I'm wrong, because this resonates with me. You accept your dark side, your dark instincts. You ritualize that, as opposed to trying to shun it, because if you try, and I do believe this in a psychoanalytic way and in an occult way, you try to shun the dark thing, it's going to come back twice as strong. But if you name it and channel it, yeah, I am a firm believer in that. And I do think there's an extent to which, maybe Catholicism is a bit less guilty of this. I don't know. The cliche is more the, really sheltered Protestant, I guess. But, it can definitely happen when you're simply raised with fear of hell and brimstone. So many people just react against that. So, no, that's not the solution. The solution, I think, is you know, and it ties into political issues as well, is a great openness and a great freedom that we have to sort of chart our own course. But it's a horrible freedom that, you know, it leads many to loneliness and ruin. But it's the sort of Faustian bargain we have as an open and democratic society. I mean, the church and other religious organizations and even just families are now powerless against pornography, against everything that's on the internet, against the funky town, even, you know, it's all there. So just telling your kids, oh, don't do this, that's not going to work. And we can blame people for that being the case, and it doesn't have to be reality. I'm not saying we should accept it blindly. We can rebel politically. I'm somewhat open to the idea of, you know, outlawing pornography, but also it's not going to happen. So what do we do with that? Well, I mean, there's more, like, I feel like we're talking in circles, and I hope this is interesting to people. But I think that there is an extent to simply having a priest say, oh, don't masturbate, don't look at pornography, is a lot less effective than getting into occult work, learning about semen retention and the power that it has. Like, that stuff is more direct and can have pretty straightforwardly good results. Like, the language of the occult, there's pitfalls to this. I'm not saying it's not. The language of the occult is better at equipping people to deal with the world as it is now than Christianity in its current form. I think it could evolve in a certain direction, but as of right now, I think there's a real, and Gen Z indeed, it seems to be very into occult stuff, and I think it's because they understand through the internet and through meme culture, you know, they understand the functioning, you know, the way these things take, what I've heard you call, Evan, loosh, for lack of a better word. Like, this stuff is all out there. I'm not sure if the church has particular dominion over it. You know, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, the God of the church has not been updated for this new technological reality. Where am I going with this? I don't know. Maybe we should cut this out.
Allow me to interject.
But
No, you were going right.
Saying? Yeah.
No, I mean, reading Nietzsche, right?
Yeah.
It truly feels like you really are reading, at least to me, the Antichrist of morality itself, and he claims to be, you know, that, and that was one of the spheres that were put spears like spear into, you know, the giant of, you know, Christianity, as well as the recent destruction of the cultural identity of Christianity regarding, you know, priests and molesting children. Because, like, it just goes to show that, like, you can, you know, put on the air, you know, in the last, you know, 30, 40 years of American, you know, cinema history and literature, we've seen the, you know, pious people, their shadow cannot be pushed down. They're doing terrible things behind the scenes, and, like,
thought on that. Yeah.
The American society has witnessed that, and it's clear that there just needs to be evolution in regards to how we conduct ourselves and what we think, and I think that's maybe what we're getting at now.
I think so, and I think that, as rightfully scared of occultism as people are, I do think it lies within some of these re-embracing of the original sparks behind spirituality in the first place. You bring up priests molesting kids. I don't know if this puts me on, like, New York Times tier. Like, I know it's a little bit of a tired argument, but honestly, in addition to, you know, whatever Kenneth Anger thing I was talking about earlier and other spiritual evolutions of my life, you know, the abuse scandal in the Catholic Church, it's been ongoing, but there was a specific instance where there's a lot of stuff came out. It was 2018, and this was the time I was kind of going from one thing to the other, and I think that was when I stopped going to church every week, was during that 2018 sex abuse scandal. And yes, it's a moral thing. Like, yes, I was not pleased with the way that the institution of the church handled that, and yes, that certainly makes me think, is this institution really infallible? Which, I mean, I guess you don't have to think, like, on the bishop level. Bishops aren't infallible. What the Pope is, like, there is, within Catholicism, you're basically supposed to think, like, this is it. Not that it's not flawed, but, like, you're basically supposed to think this institution is God's pilgrim church on earth. And I was unhappy with the way they handled that, so that obviously calls some of that into question. But honestly, much more so than rejecting the authority of the church, I was to me, the fact that there was that many child molesters who became priests, even just the fact that there's that many gay men who become priests, to me kind of proves something about how there is a repression problem within Catholicism. It doesn't adequately deal with human sexuality and doesn't adequately deal with some of these forces in general. Like, I don't know what I want the alternative to be, but that was much more the sentiment. It wasn't, oh, the church fucked this up. It was much more, oh, the church cannot deal with its own demons, and therefore how could it deal with mine? To me, that was the crisis of authority more so than a moral issue. I don't know if that sounds crazy, but it does seem to me there's this inability to deal with certain demons on the part of the church, and that is getting worse. Again, I don't have I'm not saying, oh, go buy a spell book. I just think some of the insights of occultism and some of the insights of thinkers like, even someone like William S. Burroughs and like some of these other people who deal with media and the darker side of things are just much more immediate, and that we have to learn from them.
Cool. And I think we can move on from that now. I think everyone gets it.
I don't know about that, but okay. Yeah, we can definitely move on from it.
Let's talk about your tarot work regarding when you were writing a lot. Matt was writing essays like pretty much every day and pulling cards every day on his TikTok.
Correct.
About the cards themselves and what they mean. I'd really like to hear more about synchronicities that occurred in your life, Matt, while you were pulling those cards, your experience with occultism itself, like one-to-one, and like something, because I've definitely had things that happened to me like that, where I'm like, whoa, that just manifested just like how it predicted it would, or I predicted it would. So I would love to hear some expounding upon that. If you can remember. Mm-hmm. I know that's a reach back, because I understand right now you're actually taking a break from tarot.
I am. It's only been a couple weeks, but yeah, I mean, I think with tarot, as with any other spiritual practice, you can get too far into it and sort of lose the script a bit and become neurotic about it. I think that had happened to me. Sorry. And a lot of tarot, there's pictures of tarot within the middle of the Black Album. Obviously, there's the Funky Town piece and other references to tarot in both the fiction and nonfiction. So it definitely was a source of inspiration. Technically speaking, the project you're talking about in terms of pulling cards on TikTok and writing, I was trying to write about the entire deck. I think I only got about a quarter of the way through before sort of going on hiatus. But one sec.
You see? I see. Okay.
Before going on hiatus. But technically speaking, that was after I wrapped writing the Black Album. I was like, well, what do I write now? And that was when I leaned hard into tarot. So technically, it's a different project, but you can't fully separate the two because they're from the same sort of era of my life. And tarot looms large in the Black Album. In terms of synchronicities.
Like, for example, one time I pulled Strife as a prediction for that day, and I met Strife, as it, manifested in kind of a battle with me and someone else. Not something terrible or anything, but it was coming, and I knew it was coming, and I pulled the card, and I knew it was finally going to come to a head today. Whether or not that helped me manifest that, I don't think so. I think it would have happened anyway, so...
Yeah, I'm not going to have a good answer on this one. I think part of the reason I am taking a break is because I got so far into it and would ask the same questions again and again that I lost the script on the sort of predictive quality. I've definitely had funny synchronicities with tarot in terms of almost manifesting cards. Like there's an instance with the star once where I... thought I was going to pull it, and I did, things like this. But overall, I've kind of muddied the waters of that, if I'm being honest. I think tarot is basically tarot is a picture book, and it's one that I'm now very familiar with, but almost too familiar with. And I sort of maybe sapped a little bit of the magic of it away, which is why I'm on a break now. That being said, writing about it was certainly very educational for me on esotericism, on Kabbalah, on other topics. And what I'll say is that this is not answering your question. I apologize that I don't have any really good tarot stories, as it were. But I do think going through the exercise of writing about the number of cards I did write was really valuable. I was recently asked to speak at an event that didn't end up happening, but it was on a certain theme, and I was able to sort of go back to my writing. It was supposed to be about Pluto. And the vibes it invokes, which, kind of corresponds to the death card in tarot. So when I was thinking, like, what am I going to talk about at this event? It was like, well, I'll just go see what I wrote about death. So it's really useful. Tarot in general is useful, but also writing about tarot is useful because it becomes this encyclopedia you have, like, of ground you have covered. Because after all, as talked about with the Funky Town piece, tarot is supposed to be a sort of pictorial representation of the entire universe. So for everything, a card. And if you start thinking about it that way, reading the cards, writing your own thoughts on them, it can be a really useful reference point for talking about reality. But I'm in a little bit of a trough on my overall charmed view of tarot. I think I sort of overdid it a tiny bit. And I mean, let me think about this as we continue this interview, but I don't think I have any really good stories about tarot's sort of effect on my life right now.
Okay, and for the new listeners in regards to how to use tarot, we're both tarot practitioners.
Yeah.
Would you, this is an interesting question, do you think that we are wizards? I think I'm a wizard, but maybe like a lesser wizard. Do you think you're a wizard, Matt?
No.
You practice magic, so why not?
I think that I'm still a novice, okay? Maybe I'm a lesser wizard. Maybe I never will be one. Again, at risk of maybe I'm not being the best salesman for myself or for my book throughout this interview, I think that over the course of the magic I was doing and the tarot research I was doing while writing the Black Album, I think I learned a lot and I regret nothing. But I also think I was going about so many things in a wrong-headed way that I can't really say I've done any magic that was truly worthwhile, and that maybe I was too ego-led. I mean, the best I can say is that I've met some really great people and maybe created some good synchronicities in my life kind of through the people that I came across and through the work that I was doing and even through the mistakes that I made. But I don't think I can call myself a wizard yet, maybe not even a not good wizard, because I don't know if I've yet found the real source of power. I don't know if I have that connection to God or whatever the magic is. I've let my ego get far too much in the way. And I think that the Black Album, there's no regrets, because the Black Album is supposed to be maybe channeling something darker and weaker into a book during this kind of Saturn return chapter of my life. And, I'm on a little break from tarot. I guess kind of a break from magic right now in general. Went to Mass with you this morning. I'm maybe trying to get back in touch with God. And I think whatever happens next for me with regard to occultism, because I'm not saying I'm giving up occultism either, obviously. Per all of the foregoing conversation, I still think there's these profound truths and avenues there. I think whatever happens next, like maybe I will be a wizard one day, but I'm not yet.
Yeah, it's hard to stew in these things for so long. I mean, okay, now the ducks are in the hot tub.
Doing something strange.
Pretty cute.
It is very cute.
Very cool. Okay, so I kind of see that. I see where you're going with the book, Matt, in regards to how it relates to your darkness of yourself. Is there anything you'd like to talk about right now, while these ducks hopping into the other pool again? Gosh,
why do you think they swim? Like, it's just like fun?
It's great exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably are. people say all those terrible things about ducks, that they like rape each other and they have barbed penises.
I mean, they probably do.
They probably do. Oh, okay, now both of the men.
One of the men is raping.
One of the men is actually attacking the other one.
Yeah, let's just. I hope it's all in jest. Maybe they're fighting over the female. But we just saw like a duck kill another duck right now.
One of the ducks pushed the other duck out of the water.
He's like biting his neck.
He's biting his
female
neck.
Looks sort of embarrassed for them both. Yeah, why would the Christian God make animals that rape each other with corkscrew penises? I mean, this is the kind of thing where I think that the Christian view of things doesn't quite sum up the whole of reality.
That's true.
But that doesn't dispel the value it has. It has certainly a social value. It keeps people aligned. Western civilization, we wouldn't have it without Christianity. In my opinion, even in Nietzsche's opinion, I think that's true.
Well, it's, no darkness without the light, vice versa.
No darkness without the light and vice versa. And I think if I was to be a good wizard one day, it would be the tarot equivalent. We've got a duck underwater now. They're fighting.
Oh, they're actually
close to us.
Coming.
The tarot equivalent is the Hierophant, the keeper of mysteries. Within Catholicism, that's supposed to be the priesthood, and the Pope specifically has the keys to the kingdom, and everyone else is supposed to just be a follower. And that hierarchy makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of value to it. However, I feel like we live in a world where Pandora's box has been opened. I don't know when, during the French Revolution, or maybe it's always been opened. Either way, that structure doesn't seem much. That structure has waned in its efficacy. And if you look at the Pope now, I'm hardly a Pope Francis hater, but people hate him on the right. The left still has his issue with him. He's kind of this milquetoast sort of figure. So it seems to me that the box of mysteries is open, and we kind of have to. It's this horrible freedom to explore and suss it out for ourselves. And I think if I was ever to be a wizard, it would be when I've reached a point where I feel like I understand those mysteries better. I know how to channel them when appropriate, but I'm not there as of yet. I do hope that I'm on the journey.
Well, thank you, Matt. This has been Strange Flows with Matt Pegas. Buy the Black Album on Amazon. Brush up on your magic skills. Try to figure out how to make yourself feel more fulfilled in this modern world. Thank you.